Well, hey, good morning, Fort Kids. You are dismissed down to Fort Kids. You'll have a great time down there. They are going fishing today. So, man, they're going to have a good time and have some fun out there. Hope y'all catch a big fish. I hope everybody outfishes Mike today. So that is everybody's goal, is to outfish Mike, all right? Make me proud, kids. But adults, go and take your Bibles, open them to Ecclesiastes chapter 6. Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 10. So just go to the middle, find Psalms, go to the right a little bit, and you'll run right into the book of Ecclesiastes. Man, we got some great holidays that are coming up, and I want to give a shout out to one of my favorite days of the fall, which is when we get the Bolins back. So they've been gone for a couple weeks. Man, welcome them back. Let them know that you're glad that they are back from traveling the world. So glad that they're back, but we've also got a lot of great things coming up in the life of the church. We've got, man, we talked about so many things last week that are coming up, but the big holidays, right, are Thanksgiving and Christmas. And those times of Thanksgiving and Christmas are some of my favorite times because it's time where you get to see the family that you don't have to see all year, you know what I'm talking about? But you get to hear things that like is really, really interesting and like really cool about your family. In fact, if you don't know, my dad is a lot older. He just turned 90 this year. And yes, he did have me later in life. I am 36. I was carrying Woodson around. I met somebody here one day. And the guy looked at me and he goes, "Man, it's great to have your grandson with you at church." And I was like, "How old do you think I am, sir?" And he's like, oh, he realized, you know, he didn't have my age right. And I said, "I'm only 36. And he was like, "Oh, my bad." So anyway, Dad's older, born in 1935. Obviously, his dad was born, obviously, earlier than that and went through a lot of incredible times in the history of America. And one of my favorite things about holidays is getting to sit around and talk to Dad and his sisters who are still living and get to hear their stories, right? Growing up, the things that they went through, the old family stories from way years ago that we just don't have a lot anymore. And getting to hear from previous generations and learn those things is one of the most valuable times for all of us. We get to learn how people like made it back in the day. Like you don't ever think about when you go and get like a cold water out of the refrigerator, like there was a day when there weren't refrigerators, right? Like what'd you do then? And getting to hear those stories about how people kept things cold and, you know, persevered through hot times and cold times and how they made through the Depression and it's all kind of crazy times in life that hearing those stories from grandparents and elders really helps us learn and really make better decisions. In fact, if you've ever had a grandparent who has given you wisdom, then you know what sometimes happens. Sometimes you get it and you didn't ask for it, right? And then sometimes you've got that one grandparent that you go to and you're like, "Man, please give me like some wisdom. I want to know, what did you learn in your life that if you were my age, you would do differently?" And the book of Ecclesiastes is kind of like that grandparent sitting us down and having a talk with us and saying, "Hey, I'm at the end of my life. Let me tell you what I've experienced. Let me tell you what I've learned. Let me tell you what I wish I had known when I was your age." But let me clarify something for you. This is not the grandparent who takes you for ice cream and buys toys. If you've read the book of Ecclesiastes, the author of Ecclesiastes, who I believe to be Solomon, there's other people who believe that it was one of David's sons, my mind is blanking on Koheleth, and some other names that are out there for who this might have been. But they're writing, trying to give us some wisdom. This is the grandparent that went through the hard stuff, okay? This is the grandparent that walked uphill to school in the snow and walked back home uphill in the snow. You know what I'm talking about? Barefoot. This is the grandparent that went through all the hardships, and when they smile for pictures, this is all you get. Like that's them, right? Like everybody's laughing at the dinner table and they're like, "What?" Like they miss it because they're so serious. You know, you're trying to tell them a joke, and instead of trying to get the punchline, they're trying to figure out the answer to the question logically. Like they just don't crack a smile. And in fact, I'll just give you just really good word of wisdom here. Learn from me. I went through a really hard time in my life, and I was like, I need something to walk with me through this hard time in my life. I was like, man, I'm going to turn to the Word of God. I'm going to find some deep truths in Ecclesiastes, and I got more depressed reading through Ecclesiastes than what I did before I was going through the hard time in my life. So I'm just going to tell you, this is hard stuff that we're going to hear today, but here's what we also know. Sometimes we need somebody just to say things straightforward and bold and not sugarcoating it and not being with the Southern charm, and just to say it how it needs to be said. Because sometimes we need some cold water splashed on our face to wake us up to some realities. Sometimes we just need to hear some truth, because there's a lot of people who would rather us be comfortable than actually hear the truth and make a life change. And I'm just going to tell you, as we go through the book of Ecclesiastes, and there's these 3 verses, 10 through 12, buckle up, because there's going to be some hardship we have to go through to be able to get to the end of the passage and then jump to the end of the book to actually get something encouraging. So if you stick with it, here's what I'm going to promise you. You're going to find something that's encouraging. You're actually going to find out that life has incredible meaning, and you can actually enjoy life and actually have a life that is blessed by God. So I'm going to kind of give you a picture of where Ecclesiastes is. We really don't preach out of Ecclesiastes a whole lot. Last summer, I took us through, as a church, a series called The Bible Made Simple, and we showed how there were different genres in the Bible, and how every book of the Bible is broken up into genres, and that's how they are organized in your Bible. So what we have with Ecclesiastes, it's right there, that third part, in wisdom and poetry. And listen, my mind does not work poetry. I love music, but sitting down and writing out a haiku ain't gonna happen, all right? I like straightforward, tell me what you're gonna tell me, don't paint me a picture, just tell me what you're gonna tell me, all right? And if you're like me, then just, you're right there with me, all right? Poetry might not be your thing. But look at all the things that are throughout the Bible. All the different genres where God can speak to us in multiple different ways, and Ecclesiastes is in that wisdom poetry. What is wisdom? Wisdom is not just knowing a lot of stuff, okay? It's not just more knowledge. Wisdom is knowing how to use the knowledge that we have. So think about this. Have you ever met somebody who, man, they were super, super book smart, but they had no common sense, right? You've met people like that? Well, you've met somebody who's super smart, but they're lacking wisdom. However, on the other side, have you ever met somebody who, man, you can talk to them, they get you, they know how to make decisions, they can work something, they are very wise in their decision making, but they don't have a lot of education? You just met somebody who has a lot of wisdom, but not a lot of knowledge. If you were to ask me today which one is better, I would say this: wisdom is better than knowledge, because wisdom uses knowledge to do what is best in life. And what God wants us to have is not just to know a lot of stuff. God wants us to know how to use the truths that he's given us to live for him and to live the life he has purposed for us. In fact, there's a statement come up on the screen for you. If we don't want to waste our life, we need God's wisdom on how to live. Listen, if you don't want to waste your life, learn how to live by God's wisdom. Learn how to take the truths that God gives us, learn how to take those truths and then mold them and shape them and put them into your life in a way that it's meaningful, okay? It's not just about learning. Even the demons know the things that are in the Bible. The difference is they don't obey it and live it. If you want to live the blessed life that God has for you, a life with purpose and meaning, learn how to take what is true and activate it in your life. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 19 through 20 says, "For the wisdom of this world is folly with God. For it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, that they are futile." There's a wisdom from the world that tells us to live a certain way. There's a wisdom from the Bible, and they butt heads. So there's going to be advice that you hear from the world about, hey, chase after your passions. Chase after wherever your heart goes. Hey, just build the business with no regard to how you treat people. Hey, do all of these things. And then there's going to be the Bible on this side that says, no, live a contained life. Live inside of these boundaries, and it's going to butt up against what the world is trying to tell us to do. And here's a key statement for you. If it's not from the Creator, meaning it's not in God's Word, that means it's created, and if it's created, there's a great chance it's been impacted by the fall. I'll say that again. If it's not from the Creator, meaning if it's not from God, it's created, and if it's created, there's a great chance it's been impacted by the fall. That there's things, even definitions about love, definitions about how to live a blessed lifestyle that come from the world and sound great and look great. But when you compare it with the Bible, they don't match up. And because they don't match up, the definition from the world is a fallen definition. Our world thinks that they sound wise, but grandparent Ecclesiastes today is going to tell us, don't buy into it. There's going to be things that we've lived our life by and been searching for in life and thinking we can give meaning to our life. And grandparent Ecclesiastes today is going to say, nope, hold on, don't go down that road, learn from my life, and make the adjustment now. In fact, the central verse, I really believe, for the entire book of Ecclesiastes is Ecclesiastes 1, verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What a fun book. Amen. What does vanity mean? Vanity is the quality of being worthless or futile. So here's what grandparent Ecclesiastes is telling us this morning. Everything in life is worthless and futile. Everything. And what the author of Ecclesiastes does is he goes through various ideas. He talks about wealth. He talks about prosperity. He talks about chasing after people giving you fame. He talks about material possessions that we chase after. He talks about going after wine. He talks about going after food. He talks about all these things that we chase after in life and how none of it actually gives us something meaningful that we can hold on to and that passes on with us into the afterlife. He says it's all vain. It's all vain. And here's the great news about all that. If you've ever felt like your life was worthless or futile, you are on the right track to finding how your life can actually be worthwhile and have purpose. Because when we come to the end of ourselves and we come to the end of life and find that all the things we've been chasing after don't add up and don't give us what they've been promising, then we get the point of the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's we've got to look up and look back to God. So what I want to do today is I want to walk through a couple of these verses and just unpack for us what he's talking about, how life is actually vain without the Lord. In fact, look down in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 10. He says, whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. That first phrase there, whatever has come to be already has named, or already been named, it sounds like at first glance it's a reference back to Genesis chapter 2, 19 through 20, where Adam names all of the animals, right? Because it's talking about everything that has been named. But that's not actually the point of what the passage is talking about. It's saying in a poetic kind of a way of, hey, everything that's ever been created, everything that ever will be created has all been put inside of a limit. Everything's been given a lifespan. Everything's been given a time. Everything has been given a place. Everything has been given a makeup. Everything has been given a limit. What do I mean? You ever been to like the Chattanooga Aquarium, Ripley's Aquarium? Maybe you've got like a little fish tank in your house. I want you to think about life like an aquarium. When you think about the aquarium, that little fish inside of the aquarium, right? It's like, this is my world. And it's like living inside that aquarium and goes around, does whatever it wants to. He thinks everything inside of that aquarium is all about it. And everything inside of that aquarium is all about keeping that fish alive. Everything in there is about keeping it healthy and allowing it to do what it needs to do. However, whoever owns the aquarium, whoever owns the tank, keeps boundaries on that fish. The fish isn't just in an ocean. And here's what can happen to us when we begin to think about life this way. We begin to have one of really two reactions to life, thinking about it like an aquarium where everything, as the passage says, has been named, and we have confines on how long our life is. God limits how far we can do things and what we can do and what we can't do. Here's usually our two thoughts. The first thought is, well, I'm exempt to that because I'm special. Right? It's the person kind of like a Forrest Gump. It's like, well, Mama said I was special. Mama said I could be whatever I wanted to be. And here's what the mentality kind of comes out as. This person's like, I made a deal with God, and I know that he's limited my life, and I know that he's put these parameters on me. However, I can do whatever I want to do. And God's good with me because we made a deal. And I'll tell you, if you talk to people long enough, you'll meet people who say that very thing. Well, God and I made a deal. Did you know God doesn't make deals with just an individual that he won't make with somebody else? That God has a standard for all of us where all of us are in the confines of everybody has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And we all need a relationship with God, and nobody gets a pass to get away from that. Everybody has that same standard. Everybody falls under the confines and the sovereignty of God's will and his plan. And at any point in time, because God owns the aquarium, he can reach down into the aquarium of our life and do whatever he wills and wants for his purposes. And you'll meet people who think that they own the aquarium, but they're just the fish in the aquarium. Every good thing that we have comes from God. Every season that we go through is a season where sometimes God turns up the aquarium to change some things out and to filter some things out, and sometimes it's to even purify us and to change us. And God owns that aquarium, and inside of that aquarium, it's lunacy to think that we are the ones in control. And sometimes what we'll do is when we think that we're the ones in control and we don't get out of God what we want, we do what verse 10 talks about. It says that we try to dispute with one stronger than us. But look what verse 10 says. We're not able to dispute with one stronger than us. Could you imagine for a second, you went to your aquarium one day and you're changing stuff out, and that little fish looked up at you and went, blip, 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 blip. Right? And started complaining to you like, why would you take out my gravel? Why would you move my fish around? You know, could you imagine a fish complaining back to you? No, it's insanity, right? Because you're the master, you know what's best for the fish in the tank. And that's the same way that it is with God. Or sometimes there's things that happen in our life and we don't understand it, but we have to trust the one that's above us. And we walk through life. And sometimes the things that we walk through in life are hard and they're difficult, and it can sometimes give us the second perspective, which is if my life is boxed in and God is in control, then there's no reason for me to try, and I should just give up on life and just move on and just try to do something else. And that person falls into despair. That person falls into realizing that there's nothing that they can do, and that person falls into depression, that person falls into hardship, that person falls into hating their life. And what they want to do is to argue back and forth with God. But before we get into verse 11, I want to ask this question. Have you ever met somebody who all they want to do is argue? I mean, all they want to do is argue. There's people out there who, believe it or not, who want to constantly argue. And if there's not something to argue about, they're going to find something, right? And if they can't find something, they're going to manufacture something. And they'll walk into a room, and we know there's not a pink elephant on the room, but they'll look and they'll find a pink elephant somewhere in the room. And they'll bring it up to everybody. And then you're like, there's no pink elephant. Yes, there is. And they'll argue with you about it. They're just trying to live in just chaos. Here's why. Because they've been used to chaos all their life, and they think that they have to have chaos in their life. So here's what happens. They argue and they fight for two reasons. The first is because they're trying to give authority over people to make themselves feel better, or the second one, which is oftentimes more true, They're trying to do this out of a defense mechanism to protect themselves. So you'll be talking to somebody, and you're getting closer with them, and you're growing in your relationship, and then all of a sudden, one day, just out of nowhere, boom, they explode on you. It's because you've been getting closer, and they don't know how to lower the boundary a little bit. I tell you, that's sometimes what we do with the Lord, where we're so used to the chaos of our world that we look back at God and we don't know how to handle the trauma and the negative things that come into our life. And we're so used to all that. When God brings good things into our life, we don't know how to handle it. And when we're growing, we're like, God, this is tough. This is hard. I don't really know how to handle this. And we vomit everything back on God. We do it to each other. And sometimes we look at other people and we see trauma that they have gone through and hardship that they have gone through in their aquarium of life. And we evaluate what they've gone through based on what we've gone through. And it might not be to the same degree of what we have gone through. So we look at them and go, that's not that big of a deal. You shouldn't be acting that way. Listen, I want you to read this statement I'm going to put up on the screen for you this morning. Regardless if someone else's trauma is as bad as yours, everyone has their own level of trauma that is major to them, and since that trauma is personal to them, it is major to them. You may have lost your parents at an early age and been on your own, and you learned how to deal with it. And somebody may, in their 40s or 50s, lost their parents. It's the same event, but they're processing it differently than what you did. And you're like, I lost mine, I dealt with it. Yeah, but they had theirs longer. You may lose your job and be like, hey, I can find another job because you've been through this before. Somebody's never ever lost a job, they lose a job, and they're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? That when we look at people's lives and we begin to talk and interact with people, we have to realize that other people's trauma in their life, even though their world is confined and working in a certain way, is trauma to them, and we can't tell them that's not trauma to them. It's important to them. When it comes to trauma, we can't change what happened to us, but listen, we do have a choice what we do with it and how far we take it. And we can't help what happened, but we can definitely make a choice to do and use that trauma in a certain way and how we react to it. Do you know there's a lot of studies recently that have been coming out, especially in the last decade, about how we handle trauma. And my generation and younger are, listen, the most medically treated, the most counseled, and the most medicated generation ever known on the face of the planet. But even beyond all of the counseling, the medication, and the industry around healing trauma, we are also the most mentally sick generation that has ever existed. People in my generation, I'm not saying this trying to be funny, I'm saying this because it's real. People in my generation get blocked by someone on social media and have a week-long meltdown about it. Whereas somebody who grew up in the 30s and 40s, your family lost your entire house and you lost people to World War II, and daddy didn't come home and brother didn't come home, and you had to walk through that, and you look at the trauma of people in my generation and you're like, that's nothing, bucko. But remember, trauma is trauma if it happened to the person. So how do we react to that inside of our world? Listen, I'm a huge fan of counseling. In fact, Christian counseling was vital in my life. It's been vital in my wife's life. It's been vital for us as a family. But one of the things that I see with a trend of counseling and dealing with mental health is this. It's an industry that has become about keeping people in it instead of helping people graduate out of it. And a lot of counselors, when you go to them, they plan out how many visits you'll have, and they're like, just keep coming because you're how they make money. Here's how you find a great counselor. They have a plan for it ending. They have a plan for you ending and graduating. and learning how to move on from it. Because what studies have found is that just talking about and just dealing with our trauma doesn't actually help us. It can actually ground us in it. We have to be looking beyond the trauma. We have to be looking beyond what is, listen, futile and vain in life. We have to look to something beyond life, to beyond the trauma, to beyond just today, to what can help us and actually move us forward out of it. And just saying things and talking about it. In fact, look at verse 11. It says, the more words, the more vanity, and what is the advantage to man? That Grandpa Ecclesiastes here is like, just because we talk about it, and just because we vent about it, doesn't mean things are going to get better, doesn't mean that life is not going to be vain, it doesn't mean that you're going to find meaning out of life. Just talking about it and sharing the trauma doesn't always help us get better. In fact, just think about this. You ever been at the funeral home? And listen, I'm a pastor. I've said some of these things. I've heard some of these things. You've said some of these things. Let's just not judge each other for a second and just be honest about it, okay? If you're going through tragedy, does it really help you to hear things are going to get better? No, because you're thinking, well, things are pretty crummy right now, right? One of my all-time favorites, right? You're sitting there and you're going through pain, you're going through trauma, and they're like, hey, God's got a plan. Can you tell me what it is? I mean, I'd like to know. Another one of my favorites, you're sitting there going through pain, and people are well-meaning, and they'll say something like this, it could always be worse. And you're like, please don't jinx me, right? Like we have this desire in us, right, to share words that we think are going to help and comfort. But here's what we know. Words don't always do that. In fact, sometimes words can make things worse. Because just because we talk about it, just because we hear something doesn't mean words actually help. Sometimes there are no words that give us comfort, and sometimes there are no words that help us express in words and understand what we are going through in life. And when life feels vain, and when life feels empty and worthless and futile, words just can't properly express how we feel, which is one of the reasons I love in the book of Romans, when it says in Romans chapter 8, that the Spirit speaks for us with groanings. Have you ever been in a place of life where you can't say anything, but there's just this guttural noise that comes out of you just groaning in pain and in heartache when you're just weeping and you're trying to figure out what life, the point of this is that you're going through and how hard this is, and you're just like, ah! Sometimes you just have to scream. Sometimes you just have to yell. Sometimes you just have to let out a noise. And here's what we've realized. Words can't capture that moment. But here's the great thing. In those moments for the Christian, the Spirit of God speaks on your behalf and prays for you. And when life feels futile and when life feels vain and when we feel that we are at the end of ourselves and our aquarium of a life that we just can't get out of and fix and be in control of, when it just feels that it is broken and it is being emptied and we feel like we're even drowning sometimes, to know that God is on our side and working in our lives is, man, such a thing to grab a hold to. In fact, Philippians 4 verses 8 through 9 says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. That's Paul, not Pastor Ryan. Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. That pain without God is pointless and vain, and it's just suffering. But with God, it purifies us and has a point that can actually glorify him and be good for us. On the other side of suffering, though, if we've received a lot of blessings, here's the problem with receiving a lot of blessings. If you win the lottery, what's going to happen the next day at your house? Handout, right? I'd like a new vehicle. I'd like to pay my bills off. Hey, aren't we friends? Don't you remember back in third grade when I lent you this? Well, now there's interest. I need $100,000, right? That's how people are. But here's what you realize. Even when you get the blessings in life, People are going to come to you and they're going to seek things out instead of seeking out the friendship that you thought that you had. You grow a large business and there's going to be somebody who comes out with a new idea, and that new idea builds a bigger business than yours and may cost you your business. That you go to work and you've worked a job for years, and here's what you found out. You thought you were in and trusted, and it was a family that you were with at that company. However, you found out you were just a number and you could be replaced when it came time for layoffs. We can become famous and be great at a sport. People love us in music and in art, and we do something heroic, but suddenly somebody else does something 2 weeks later and people forget our name. The trophy gets dust on it. The accolades fade away. The star on Hollywood Boulevard, somebody's walking on it, not even looking down and reading about our name and thinking about how incredible we once were. That eventually our names will be forgotten. Our faces will no longer be remembered. And the life that we lived, no one will ever talk about it. Books that once recorded history are going to go away, and whoever owns the digital age can change and make whatever truth they want to make. Truth will be manipulated. Things will be said that have never been said but blamed on people. Our memory will fade from existence. And at the end of the day, we have to ask the question, what is the point of life? In fact, what's the point of prayer? I mean, if the passage in verse 10 talks about that we shouldn't even argue with the one that's stronger than us, then why even pray in the first place? Listen, I want you to understand this about prayer, because we don't talk about this side of prayer as much as what we should. Prayer isn't about us getting stuff from God. Prayer is about God changing us through trusting in Him. Prayer isn't about us getting stuff from God. Prayer is about God changing us through trusting in Him. That prayer is us coming to God and saying, God, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. God, I don't understand this vain life. God, I feel like inside the aquarium of my life, this is not going the direction and the way that I want it to. And we bring that back to Him, and He's like, hey, I can take it. Bring your frustrations. Bring your venting. I mean, gosh, that's what the majority of Psalms are. And on the other side, when things are great and we bring our praises back to God, we say, God, this is amazing. God, this is the best thing ever. God, thank you for all of this. That it's these moments where when we come in prayer to God, we're saying, God, I trust to bring all of me to you. And God, I'm going to bring me to you because I'm going to search for some sort of a meaning in my life that is outside of me, because I realize the life that I live in this confined amount of time, in my 80 or so years, in the space that I live, in my zip code, at my job, there's got to be something more than just this, God. There's got to be something outside of this. And God brings us to passages like verse number 12 in Ecclesiastes chapter 6. For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? You know, we begin thinking about life. These guys here, they think about life a lot different than some of us do. And we have a Facebook group for Southeast High School class of 2007. That's when Shasta and I graduated from high school, and one of the guys posted it this week and said, hey, 20's coming fast. And I said, not ready. Some of you have been out of, we're not going to go there, for a lot longer than 20 years. And you know what I hear from a lot of you who have grown kids? You look at Shasta and me and say, hey, don't blink. Don't blink. Woodson and Ellen are going to be gone before you know it. Because here's what you've realized. You've looked at life, and you've seen life. If I hit somebody, I apologize. You've seen life unfold, and wait, can you just pick that up and take it to the back for me? This was going a lot better in my mind before the starting. you look at life and you see how life has unfolded for you. And you see it from down there looking back. These guys right here and these girls, they see life that way. So when you hear a message like this, those of you who are like Grandparent Ecclesiastes, you're looking and you're like, man, y'all better listen to this. Y'all better listen. And y'all think, oh, I got plenty of time. I got plenty of time. I can have fun. I can do what I want to. It doesn't matter to me. I got all this time. All this time to live life however I want to live. There's a book in the New Testament that if I could redo the grouping of the books of the Bible, I would group the book of James as wisdom. Because I think James brings in the idea that the book of Ecclesiastes is trying to get us to bring in. And listen to James chapter 4, verses 13 through 15. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. The way our brain thinks is we think this way. I've got all the time in the world. I don't have to make a decision for Jesus today. I've got 30, 40, 50 more years until he calls me home. I've got a long time. I don't have to change this habit. I know it's just a private habit. I know it's just a private sin, but it's not really bothering anybody. I'll give it up when I want to give it up. Because we think long life. And for those who are closer to the end than us, you look at us like Grandpa Ecclesiastes and you say, those things you're chasing after, boy, those things you're chasing after, girl, it's vain. It's vain. You think it's going to bring you happiness and joy? It's not. Because you've learned through experience the things that we're chasing after in our youth and in our passions, in our excitement, and wanting to do things that are fun, so to speak, it really doesn't matter. And here's what happens. One day, without knowing it, we're living our life and we think we have all these years to live, all these years to do whatever we want to do. This life is dull. And life gets cut short. And people gather around us at the funeral home and say, man, their life got cut so short from what they could have had. And we end life right here. And there's going to be people who may say, I wonder what could have been. I wonder what could have been if way back here, when they didn't know that they only had this long left, that one day at church, they had said yes to Jesus. If they had finally just stopped the drinking. If they had finally just taken a big boy, big girl pill and gone to the rehab and said, I'm playing the long game instead of the short game. If they would have just said, I'll take the piece of humble pie and I'll go back and I'll apologize to that person instead of holding in my pride and holding on to the hurt. I wonder what could have been in that family. I wonder what could have been if that person who had started dabbling in the pornography and just dabbling in the quiet sins had finally just confessed it to the Lord and gotten away from it, what could have been in their marriages and what could have been in their family. And when they just started smoking weed, if they just stopped just smoking weed, then they never would have gotten to cocaine and they never would have had an overdose. I wonder what would have just happened if they just stopped way back here. I wonder what would have happened if when they took that one little thing from work and nobody noticed and they realized, hey, you know what, I might be able to sell this and make some money. If they just stopped there instead of money laundering and stealing from the company and going to prison. I wonder what might have happened if they'd just been honest and told the truth. I wonder what may have happened if they had just decided to say yes to Jesus and not lived a life with no point. Grandpa Ecclesiastes finishes up in Ecclesiastes 12, 13 through 14. It says, the end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Here's the main point for today. Write this statement down. Life's greatest meaning is to know God, live for him, and make him known to others. Life's greatest meaning is to know God, live for him, and make him known to others. I want to ask you today, how do you view your life? None of us know how much longer our rope is going to go. But I can tell you what you can do. You can take the message of today and realize this is not in vain. This is a wake-up call from the Lord to you today to stop some things and to start some things, because you don't know how long your rope of life is going to go before it gets cut short. And man, don't let your life end vain and apart from knowing God, apart from living for him, and apart from making him known to others. If you're a Christian here today, listen, leave a legacy of faith. Leave a legacy of faith. Don't just build a big house and grow a big company. Lead people to Jesus. That's what matters for eternity. Help people live for Jesus. You live for Jesus. Know what heaven's going to be like before you get there. Live it out here on earth. Let his kingdom come into Catoosa County and into Walker County, into whatever county you live in. Let his presence come through you. Don't wait until the end of your life. What vain that would be.